Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're having a wonderful day. If you're new here, my name is Neve and it would mean the world to me if you would stick around. I'm back. I'm very sorry about the extended absence. I will explain myself a little bit before I start. I feel I owe you guys that. I basically got a new job at the start of March, which is a lot of hours, and I basically don't do anything anymore other than work. I basically come home and I fall asleep, and I've still been trying to figure out how on earth you're meant to do other things. So that was a major part of why the channel took a bit of a backseat. But I'm feeling a bit better. I feel like I've got slightly more of a grasp on how to function whilst working. So we're going to try again. I cannot promise regular uploads, but I really enjoy making videos, so I really would like to try and make a point of doing them again as often as possible. So that's the goal. Let's hope I stick to it. Today's video is going to be a pathetically overdue what I read in May wrap up, so that I can hopefully bring my June one. Really what I should have done is put both months in one video, but you will soon see that that would have been a very long video, so I am not going to do that. I'm going to do them separately. I'm not going to ramble too much longer because I could ramble forever, and I'm just going to get started. I can't really remember what order I read them in, but they do sort of fit into categories, so I'm just going to go through them like that. The first category that I'm going to share with you is the Oseman-verse, because if you didn't know, if you're living under a rock, the Heartstopper TV adaptation came out at the end of April, and myself and many other gay people in the world got a bit obsessed. I had read all of Alice Oseman's novels previous to the series coming out, but I had not yet made my way on to Heartstopper. You're about to see that has changed. Yeah, so starting with the graphic novels themselves, we have Heartstopper Volume 1. Looks like this. It's very pretty. This one I would probably give like a 4 out of 5, maybe a 5 out of 5. It's just so good. It's just so good. I adored this. Me and Charlie Spring are one and the same. I see so much of myself in him. That was quite weird to read, but that happens a lot when I read, so I've got used to that sort of uncanny feeling. And I just love this. I love the just like wholesome queer experience. It's so cheesy and teenagery in a way that we don't always get with queer media, and it's done so well, and the characters are lovely, and I just really adore Alice Oseman's art style. It's just so good. It's just so good. So yes, I like this one. Next up we have Heartstopper Volume 2. I think this might be my favourite. It's one of my favourites. I love this one. I love this one a lot. It's just amazing, and Sarah Nelson, Nick's mum, reminds me so much of my mum, and I just love her. Just love her. I'm very sorry for the... I don't usually have nails and I can't stop. But anyway, yes. Next up, we have Heartstopper Volume 3. This one is set mostly in Paris. The Paris trip's so good. This is where... I mean, the first volumes of Heartstopper do deal with some serious content, namely in terms of sort of like unhealthy, toxic relationships. but this one is where we start to explore Charlie's journey with mental illness. So there is some more seriousness, I guess, in this one, but it's still handled in a way that keeps the overall tone of the novel really light-hearted and pleasant to read, which I really appreciated. Sometimes you want to read this kind of stuff done well, but without being like torture to read, and I think that this does that amazingly. It's handled so sensitively, with so much respect, so much understanding, but it's still a very light-hearted, upbeat graphic novel. And there's so much love, and I just loved it. So yes, and then last but not least, we have Heartstopper Volume 4. This is the graphic novel which I think deals the most in this series with Charlie's mental illness and how that affects him and the people around him. It goes into things like therapy and inpatient treatment and, you know, descriptions of eating disorders, stuff like that. But again, nothing like overly detailed, triggering. I think it's done very well, age appropriately, keeping with the tone of the series. It's so good, they're so in love. It's just so lovely to read about. And all of the characters in these that aren't Nick and Charlie that you're meant to root for, you just do. You love them. They're all so well built, and the art style is just so good. And the teachers, the teachers. Just read Heartstopper. If you haven't read Heartstopper, what are you doing? Do it. Next up, keeping with the theme, I went back and reread Solitaire by Alice Oseman, which I think I read for the first time in 2019, so it's been a very long time, definitely due a reread. This is the story of Charlie, Heartstopper's protagonist's sister Tori. This book is very different in tone to a lot of Alice Oseman's other novels in that Tori is very much an unreliable narrator. She's dealing with a plethora of mental health issues that are sort of not written off like by the author, but Tori herself never really acknowledges them as a genuine problem. They're sort of like described as this like pessimistic worldview when they're actually probably a much more severe problem. And that's really interesting to read about, but it also can be quite difficult, and it can sort of like put you off of characters in this novel a little bit. So it definitely requires a little bit more like thought than some of Alice Oseman's other novels, which is quite interesting given that this was her debut. You would think that the heavier stuff, the more complex stuff would have maybe come later on, and it's not that there isn't that in the other novels, but just like the tone of this definitely is slightly darker than the tone of other ones. So watch out for that if you are going to read this having come from Heartstopper. But I really enjoyed this. It's definitely not my favourite of Alice Oseman's works, but I've never read an Alice Oseman novel, novella, graphic novel that I didn't enjoy. This one is not the exception to that. And I really like Tori, and I like to revisit her and come back and experience her through like a re-enlightened view of someone who has now consumed all of the Alice Oseman cinematic universe, as it's now being referred to. I think I came to this with a fresh set of eyes that made me appreciate it more than I probably did the first time I read it, and that was pretty cool. Next up in the theme, I've read Nick and Charlie, the novella. It was just good. This one is quite sad actually, because it follows a kind of tough time in Nick and Charlie's relationship, and they don't handle it particularly well to begin with. But again, they're just very in love, and it's just nice to read about. It was nice to get to skip a little bit, not much, but a little bit into their futures, and yeah, I just loved it. You're sensing a theme here, I guess, and the theme is that I'm an Alice Oseman fan. And last up on the theme is the other Alice Oseman novella, This Winter. This one is also kind of sad, but very wholesome. We get a lot of hurt comfort. Tori's epic. Just good. Just good. You know, they're just... Alice Oseman, she knows what she's doing, and she's doing it well. So yeah, that is that. Moving on to books that weren't written by Alice Oseman. there's not a lot of them. Next we have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I love this cover, this copy. This is like one of the, like this, I think the cover from when it was like kind of originally released. They've changed it now. And I'm kind of sad that I have this one only because I know that now when I buy the other ones they're not going to match. Even though I prefer this to the covers that they now have. Anyway, that's not really the point. I really like this. This is kind of like sci-fi fantasy, set in a world where people who are called clairvoyants, they basically have like some kind of special magical ability to do with dreams or the senses, that kind of thing, are basically illegal, being hunted by some sort of like dystopian government. And our protagonist, she makes a mistake and then things go badly and we kind of watch that happen. I, at the beginning of this, didn't think I was going to like it, but then I ended up really enjoying it. Samantha Shannon, the author of this, who you might know of writing The Priory of the Orange Tree, knows how to build a world. So she does. She really does know how to build a world, and I ended up really much more invested in the world and the people in it than I thought I would be, given that fantasy can be a bit of a hit or a miss for me. This was really interesting. I'm very excited to continue the series, but I'm so excited to see what happens next. The end of this is very kind of like, it's like a big moment how this book ends, and there's lots of questions that haven't been answered yet and I need them to be answered, so I'm looking forward to reading the second one. If you are a fantasy fan, if you like sort of like heavy on the world building fantasy, I definitely would recommend that you check this one out. Samantha Shannon's brilliant. She knows how to write. She writes extremely well. She builds worlds and characters really well, and the sort of like magic system, or whatever you want to refer to it as, in this is genuinely really fascinating, although it does take quite the memory, because I was reading this and I would forget, like they'd refer to the type of clairvoyance that someone had and I would be like, I can't actually remember what that is, and I'd have to like go back and look again. So there is a little bit of that required, but I think it's worth it. If you're in for paying attention to what you're reading, then I definitely think this is a read that you would enjoy. I recommend it. I enjoyed it. I can't wait to find out what happens next. Next up we have Snowflake by Louise Nealon. This book follows Debbie, who lives on a farm in rural Ireland with her mentally ill mother and her alcoholic uncle, and starts university at Trinity College Dublin, which is a big adjustment, and it follows the year she has. It's a hard year, lots of stuff goes wrong. I bought this because I was intrigued by the title, and also I thought the blurb made it sound quite interesting, but I was like a little bit wary because sometimes this particular type of sort of contemporary literature, you know, sort of like the Sally Rooney and the, oh my god, I can't remember her name, the woman that wrote Exciting Times, which I haven't actually read, but like, you know, that kind of, sometimes that's a major hit or a miss for me, and I was hesitant to buy this in case I hated it, but I actually ended up really quite liking it. I think it did really well the sort of like depressed young adult woman just trying to make it through the year thing that I don't always think that they do well, or that sometimes is what puts me off. Like I just end up finding the protagonists really irritating, whereas I was genuinely rooting for this girl. I understood the way her upbringing and her gender and things like that played into the issues that she had, and also the way that she played into her own issues, her family played into her issues. She was willing to take a little bit more initiative than I think sometimes protagonists in novels like this do, and I've appreciated that. It meant a little bit more happened. There was a little bit more happening, discussion, and when things went wrong and she did break down or did something stupid, you had a lot more like sympathy for her, because you could tell she was actually really trying to like sort herself out, help other people. I just quite enjoyed this. It's not the most groundbreaking thing I've ever read. It's probably not my favourite thing that I've read this year, but I had a good time reading it. I read it pretty quickly. And yeah, I'm glad I read it. I would recommend it. And it's made me more inclined to try and read other books like this, which before I wouldn't say I was very inclined to do. So I'll take that as a win, because there's lots of books like this and I'm definitely missing out on something avoiding them as a whole. My last but not least is the book I was probably most excited to read in May, and also the book that probably took me the longest to read in May, because I started reading it right after I started my job and was like, oh my god, I have no time to read, what am I doing? And it took me ages. But I did it, and I'm so glad I did, and that book is Pride and Prejudice by Miss Jane Austen. If you know me personally, you will know that the 2005 film adaptation of Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadden is one of my favourite movies ever. I've probably watched it like 10 or 12 times this year since I watched it for the first time in February. It's probably more than that. I just watch it, I finish it, and I start it again. I love that movie so much, and I felt genuinely ashamed that I had never read the book, because I love to read, and I feel like if you love to read and like so much of your life and your personality is based on books, you really should have read this one. And I was like, I have to get on that, and I'm so glad I did, because I loved this book. I wasn't expecting to love it. I thought I would like it because I like the film and I would, you know, I already like the characters, but I had such a good time reading this book. Elizabeth is such a fascinating character to read, and I am 100% a Mr. Darcy stan, a Mr. Darcy apologist first, human being second. I love that man. I think he's hilarious. I think he's so sweet. I like that she said fix yourself and he said okay, and he did it. Fantastic. Genuinely, I think this book is hilarious. I think these characters are so funny. I think the same thing about the film. They're brilliant. Some of the things they hit out with is fantastic. I will say, Mr. Collins, much more unbearable in the book than he is in the film. I just kind of laugh at him in the movie. I'm just kind of like, you're a bit silly, aren't you? In this, he is genuinely infuriating. Like, absolutely infuriating. But that was also really fun to read. I will say that reading Lady Catherine in the book just made me so much more obsessed with Judi Dench's like portrayal of her in the film. That woman aced it. But yes, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. If you're putting off reading it, if you haven't read it yet, you're not sure whether or not you should, do it. Do it. I'm telling you, it's worth it. You should do it. I had so much fun. I immediately went and bought Emma, because I just feel like I've made a grievous mistake not having brought Jane Austen into my life sooner. I'm genuinely ashamed to be an adult who had never read Jane Austen until now. So I'm fixing it, okay? I'm fixing it. Hopefully June or July's wrap up will feature at least one Jane Austen novel other than this one. And yeah. Basically, I have no bad opinion of this book. I think it's brilliant. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Lots of fun. Highly recommend. Get on it if you've not got on it before. Also, oh, I almost forgot. I also reread or re-listened to the audiobook of Alexis Hall's Boyfriend Material, which I have already talked about in a video this year because I read it in February, I think. And I also listened to the audiobook last year, so it's in a video from last year, so I couldn't be bothered going and getting it down. But yeah, 5 out of 5. That audiobook is like one of the only audiobooks that I can actually sit and listen to. It's read absolutely perfectly. I love it. It's probably one of my like main sort of like comfort pieces of media. I just think it's brilliant. Alexis Hall knew exactly what itch in my brain needed scratched when he wrote Boyfriend Material, and I'm so grateful for it. I love that book so much. And I listened to the audiobook in May whilst I painted the kitchen, and it made it a much more enjoyable experience. 10 out of 10. Couldn't recommend more. If you're a fan of a rom-com, if you like Bridget Jones, if you're gay, if you're all three, you should read Alexis Hall's Boyfriend Material because it's really very good, and I absolutely love it. Okay, that is everything I read in May. Basically just lots of Alice Oseman. I'm okay with that. I'm quite content actually with that. It's more than I thought it was, so that's pretty cool. If you want to know what I'm reading but don't want to wait to find out if I will remember to upload another video, you are more than welcome to follow me on Instagram or on StoryGraph. I will make sure that both of those things are linked in my description, although my socials usually are linked in the description of every video. I hope that you have enjoyed today's video. If you did and you're not already subscribed, I would really like it if you did. If you enjoyed today's video and you are already subscribed, like it, leave me a comment, tell me what your favourite thing you read in May was. There will hopefully be a video coming soon, as well as my June wrap up of my mid-year stats, which I'm very excited to do because I check them obsessively, and I'm excited to be able to talk about them because I'm pretty chuffed with how I'm getting on so far, but I'm excited to have a look in some more detail and share them with you guys, so hopefully that video will also be coming pretty soon. And yeah, I will see you guys later. Bye.